Thanksgiving, Christmas, and the year ahead. Happy Thanksgiving week, everybody. Today, I want to start out by saying that a lot of people in our country who are going to be going through food insecurity during Thanksgiving week and during the holiday season when it gets to Christmas and other holidays that people observe. When food becomes an insecurity, the uh, the soul of the gathering goes away, and it is filled with worry. So I have made a list of resources that I have put in the bottom of in the description box of this video. Please take a look at those resources. Those are food pantries in various areas in the country, as well as a couple of deals by food chains that allow for a budgeted Thanksgiving meal. And I put that in the references section. I wanted to come out today and talk to you freely without any sort of script because we know that there's a lot going on. We've already seen sort of the beginning of the fight where Democrats really urged Republicans during the shutdown to cut down on their projected cuts to Medicaid and SNAP benefits. Medicaid cuts are scheduled to be reduced by $1 trillion over the next 10 years. Yeah. And SNAP benefits are scheduled to be reduced by $176 odd billion over the next, I think, 10 years, if not 5 years. And these things haven't even kicked in yet. These provisions of the big bad bill that Donald Trump and the MAGA Congress passed, these provisions have not even been implemented yet. And the shortage of what we experienced during the shutdown of SNAP benefits not reaching to certain people and certain states allowing those benefits to go forward, and the federal government saying, Donald Trump threatening that he's not going to reimburse the states. But thankfully, in the continuing resolution, the reimbursements were passed. But what will happen when the big bad bill goes into effect? These SNAP cuts will be cut as the years go on. What happens with the Medicaid program? It's going to be regressively gutted every single year. I said progressively because every single year it would be more and more and more cuts. And that problem remains. And we're going to see a very small sliver of the impact of MAGA Republican agenda when the Affordable Care Act subsidies expire at the end of December, and Republicans will have the choice of either extending Affordable Care Act subsidies, or they will have the option of proposing a new plan that replaces Affordable Care subsidies. And if none of those two happen, then health insurance costs are going to skyrocket for everybody. Not just for the people who can't afford to go to the Affordable Care Act marketplace and get subsidized health insurance. Not just them. Because the insurance market is going to be hit and people are going to go off of insurance and not have insurance and hope for the best. Those people who are going to be getting insurance, who can afford to get insurance, their insurance cost is going to go up because insurance companies have to make up for the loss of not having the subsidized clients, the subsidized insurees, because the cancellation of the Affordable Care Act and without implementation of any sort of government help to provide affordable health care to the American people. So those things are coming towards us. We can't look away. We mustn't look away. Because if we look away from the problems today, when they get to us, we're not going to be prepared. We need to prepare for the discriminatory practices of the Trump regime and the current Supreme Court. We know that this Supreme Court has twice very briefly said that trans rights effectively are not individual rights that this court and this regime vests onto the people, even though transgender people have been historically marginalized in our country and all over the world for thousands of years. So it falls on the system of ordered liberty to give these marginalized people protection. But that's not how the Supreme Court sees it. And we are seeing that discrimination and the fallout from that discrimination happen everywhere, from your passport to military bans to ban in sports. And it is a discrimination, bigoted campaign. Make no mistake about it. And we need to prepare for it. The LGBTQ plus community needs to stand behind trans people. And we also need to be very careful about what cases we litigate, because if they are centrally premised on contesting Obergefell v. Hodges, which gave same-sex people the right to marry, it's very likely that this Supreme Court will take that right away, just like they did with Roe versus Wade. We are also experiencing, away from our individual rights, I'll get to that in a minute, there is an assault on state sovereignty by Donald Trump's regime. Not only is he sending in ICE, DHS, CBP agents who continue to have roving patrols and racial profiling while they are detaining and arresting and abusing people all across the United States, including American citizens. The issue of state sovereignty comes in when Donald Trump tries to deploy the National Guard to the various states and take National Guards from different states and send them to different states, like California to Oregon or Texas to Illinois, which makes absolutely no sense because they're not neighboring. They're nowhere close to one another. It's just the whim of Donald Trump. And the cases about National Guard being deployed on American soil is being litigated in the Supreme Court right now. It is, I don't know when the hearing is going to be on that. I also don't know when the ruling is going to come out on the tariffs thing, which is the tariffs are having a really, really bad impact on the economy. So much so that Donald Trump's own administration is ratcheting down the tariffs quietly on food items and other items in order to bring the inflation cost down. But that's not going to bring the inflation costs down anytime soon, because it is already in the system, and we are already seeing skyrocketing prices of anything from beef, coffee, to fresh produce, and that is being impacted by the tariffs. And the tariffs case of whether the Donald Trump's tariffs are valid or not is actually still in the Supreme Court. They have heard the case, and it has been over 2 weeks, and they have not ruled on the matter. And they need to rule on the matter. They need to set up a date for oral arguments for the National Guard cases. Or if they are to rule without oral arguments at the preliminary stage, based on the briefings that have been provided, they now have all the briefings they need in order to rule on that matter as well. SCOTUS also has the issue of birthright citizenship that is pending in the courts, and the validity of Donald Trump's executive order that restricts birthright citizenship, and the Supreme Court is still holding on to that case about birthright citizenship. So the Supreme Court, in many ways, is slow walking and allowing Donald Trump's regime to carry out these lawless raids and these lawless executive orders about wrangling up immigrants, homeless, mentally ill, Antifa, and anti-fascists, designated them as domestic terrorists. That's the impetus for him to send his federal agents and send the National Guard into the different cities. The Supreme Court is not taking up these cases at the right pace. They're doing it in a very slow manner, which I believe is having a bad impact, an ill impact, and it's causing more harm every day that passes by, that people's rights are being infringed upon, that people are being assaulted, that people are having to pay high costs because of tariffs that are invalid, that are imposed by this regime, that people are being intimidated from not going out and participating in community life because of the roving patrols, because of the spyware and the surveillance state that Donald Trump is implementing now with the help of companies like Google, which is allowing spyware from the government to be uploaded onto the law enforcement phones and databases, but taking down apps that creators make that would pinpoint the location of ICE presence, or that would warn about ICE presence. So we are stuck with whistles and yard signs and other creative projects to be able to stop ICE. We are left with protesting, and there's this really amazing way of protesting where you have lines and lines in California at Home Depot of people buying like this ice scraper for like 17 cents or whatever, for really cheap, buying them and then returning them. Like, so there's this cycle of people who are buying and returning ice scrapers to send a message to Home Depot that the fact that they are allowing federal agents to come onto their property and infringe on the rights of people based on how they look, how they speak, where they gather, what work they do, racial profiling that is being enabled by the Perdomo case, in which Kavanaugh said it is okay for for law enforcement to use those tactics as part of the reasonable suspicion analysis. And the reasonable suspicion analysis itself, that is the standard for immigration inquiries, is now spilling over to the citizenry, because they are arresting American citizens without reasonable suspicion based on racial profiling. And it has created a mess. We know so far that 25 detainees have died in the detention facilities in the United States, all around the United States. And if we know of 25 deaths, there's got to be more. We don't know what's happening inside those detention centers. They're not being given the right to counsel. They're not being given their due process rights. They're being seized unreasonably, and they're being kept in conditions that would be considered cruel and unusual, and that too without the due process of law. It's like 4th, 5th, 6th, 8th Amendment violations. If states are helping the federal government in doing this, then it is violation of the 4th, 5th, 6th, 8th Amendment through the 14th Amendment that ensures due process of law. And all of this is happening in America right now as we walk towards an authoritarian regime and farther away from democracy. But remember the elections. Remember the elections of 2025 and watch for the elections and the momentum of the people in the No Kings protests that have come out and resolved to not let Donald Trump's regime steamroll over American rights, steamroll over what it is to be American. You know, you have Donald Trump right now cornered to the point where he is threatening members of Congress who have come out and told the military not to follow illegal orders, which is a requirement in the United States Military Code of Justice. And Donald Trump has been calling for their arrest and their hanging and their execution because of sedition and because they are traitors. It is not sedition and it is not treason to inform and remind the military that it is their obligation to not follow illegal orders. So what are you saying, Donald Trump? Are you saying that your orders are inherently illegal or that you are knowingly giving illegal orders? Because of course they have to follow the commander-in-chief's orders. But if those orders are illegal orders, they have to follow the rule of law and not the rule of Donald Trump. And that's something that these brave veterans and members of Congress and have come out and said, and we need to stand with these members of Congress and with the military and say, yes, that is the right message. It is not sedition or treason to remind the military that they are beholden to the Constitution of the United States and not to one man. You know, you have Donald Trump coming and talking about sedition and treason when Donald Trump's stand back and stand by Proud Boys and Oath Keepers were convicted of seditious conspiracy by a jury of their peers and were sentenced to 20 to 22 years in prison because of seditious conspiracy. And Donald Trump pardoned all of them, including those convicted of seditious conspiracy. I believe that Donald Trump committed seditious conspiracy by inciting the insurrection, by having the fake elector plan, by having the stand back and stand army cause disruption and lead the forces to invade the United States Congress and stop them from counting the electoral votes of the 2020 election. All of that conspiracy is part of Donald Trump's seditious conspiracy. And the only reason why Donald Trump is still out and not been held accountable is because Merrick Garland's DOJ was not doing their job as promptly as they should have been. And also because Donald Trump's enablers destroyed a whole lot of evidence that would connect Donald Trump directly to the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys. But, you know, in my mind and in public opinion, it should be driven down that Donald Trump pardoned the seditious conspirators who heard his call to stand back and stand by, who heard his call to be at the Capitol on January 6th because it would be wild for them to plot and plan, so much so that they were convicted of seditious conspiracy and then Donald Trump pardoned them. That whole story for me includes Donald Trump as the seditious conspirator. You know, we always try to sort of minimize or try to placate, like, how can it be that a president of the United States would do it to the United States? Well, we need to get past that because we have now, again, a president of the United States who is every day working against the basic interest of the United States, whether it be working against the interest of soy farmers and people who are in the beef industry, or against people in the renewable tech industry, or whether it be in our defense posture of cutting out our cybersecurity defense programs, or whether it be compromising military readiness by discriminating against people in the military, by distorting what the military is supposed to follow. We have this disarray happening. All the while, Donald Trump is building his private army, DHS army, with surveillance. And we try to blame shift that off to people like Stephen Miller and people like Russell Vought. But you know what? Who is to blame? The buck stops at the Resolute desk. That is who is to blame. That is who is responsible. We are now 10 months into Donald Trump's second term and his first regime as wannabe dictator, and he has failed to bring down the cost of living. He has said he doesn't want to hear about affordability, but now he wants to talk about affordability because it is pinching the wallet of everyday Americans, and he's getting the result of that in the polls. And people are equating that with Joe Biden. Joe Biden got a crashed economy because of COVID. If you look at the numbers, our economy was crashing and in free fall. And President Biden took that economy, turned that around into one of the quickest turnarounds, quickest restorations of our economy in American history, and shot our economy back up to being the most competitive economy in the world in the span of 4 years. And the last year of his presidency, he brought down inflation finally from what had happened in the pandemic. And I'm not blaming Donald Trump for what happened with the pandemic, because that came at the very tail end of Donald Trump's first term. However, what the pandemic caused, what the economic impact of the pandemic can be seen all around the world, where economies all around the world are still reeling from inflation problems from the COVID era. But because of President Biden's economic packages, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Act, the CHIPS Act, gun safety legislation, because of these different actions, and by going out and making sure that companies are not price gouging, President Biden was able to bring inflation down to 2%. And in the last 10 months, that has now gone up to 3% already. And it's rising. Because the numbers we have now are September's numbers. Because guess what? Donald Trump fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics because she was providing the American people with the right numbers of how the economy is going. So now we have September's numbers, but we don't have October's numbers or the direction in which the economy is going right now. We need to remember that the American people, despite the differences and the divides that Donald Trump sows into us, we want the same things. We want affordable health care. We want an affordable cost of living. We want affordable housing. We want security at the end of our lives. We want elder care and child care to be considered as part of the social safety net. We need to ensure and make the Social Security fund solvent by taxing the rich and lifting the cap on how people are taxed on their Social Security taxes when they are making over $1 million. Because if you are making over $250,000 a year, your Social Security is capped. You don't have to pay any more for Social Security after $250,000. That needs to be removed. So the higher you earn, the more you pay into the Social Security system. And that in and of itself would make the Social Security system solvent. We know that taxing the rich works because it worked during the New Deal. We know that today the wealth disparity in America is such that billionaires are adding billions and billions of dollars to their net worths, while millions and millions of Americans are food insecure and going around and waiting in food pantry lines. The attacks on our fundamental liberties and our basic interests are seen throughout Donald Trump's regime, where you have Donald Trump throwing lavish parties at Mar-a-Lago while people are waiting at food pantries. We are seeing an erosion of our constitutional rights and an overreach of federal state powers coming into our cities, coming into our homes, and violating our constitutional rights. That fascist move towards bringing the federal state back into our lives violates the Bill of Rights. And if you think it violates our right of expression when you're arresting people on the streets for peaceful protesting, when you're assaulting people on the streets for peaceful protesting, if these agents are breaking into your homes without any warning, without even such a warrant and warning and notice, they are breaking into your homes, violation of the Third and Fourth Amendment rights. And if you think that your right to possess and bear a gun is going to be secure in this fascist regime, you have another thing coming. Just wait till Donald Trump grabs the country by the you-know-what with his DHS army. It is already happening. Then there's Donald Trump's regime's assault on healthcare with Bobby Kennedy Jr. messing around and messaging in a very dangerous way that talks about vaccines causing autism and says with an asterisk on the CDC webpage that vaccines are not related to autism, and the asterisk is there to tell you that this message is being put up because of the chair of the health committee in the Senate has asked for it, thereby sowing doubt in the truth, the verity of the fact that vaccines, there's no evidentiary link between vaccines and autism. It's not just that, though. It's not just Bobby doing that. It's also the Department of Health and Human Services cutting public health programs that will have an impact on everyday lives of people in inner cities and rural areas. That's part of the Medicaid cuts. That's part of the cuts coming to the Department of Health and Human Services. Then you have the gutting of the education department and essentially hollowing it out. So the public education system in the United States will crumble. That is a huge, what would I say? It's like a shotgun shot to your foot to completely obliterate American progress by undermining our education systems. It is an assault on the future of America and the possibility of Americans and the competitiveness of Americans in the global field, in every single field, whether that be the humanities or technology. You have that happening with Donald Trump attacking the universities as well. You have Donald Trump attacking the universities' educational institutions and their grants. So this is what we are heading into. We are heading into a world this coming year where America's soft power has been slashed completely because we betrayed the world by reneging on the U.S. aid program. And we are seeing the impact of that with people dying around the world because of the cut of the U.S. aid program. Then you have Donald Trump's attack on the press, him bullying the press, him bullying law firms. His bullying of the press has become overt, where he would threaten to take away ABC's license because a reporter asked him and Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia questions that are relevant, that the American people want to know about and want to hear the truth about. And he attacks the press instead of answering. Well, he answers the question in a condescending way and skirts the issue that he himself is invested in business ventures in Saudi Arabia, and then he attacks the press. Or he attacks the press by telling them to be quiet, quiet piggy. Some sort, and you can see that his demeanor changes into being a despot, being raging, being wrathful. And that's not what we want in an American president, who needs to be measured, who has the launch codes for thousands and thousands of nuclear weapons. We are also going to see in the coming months what happens with the Jeffrey Epstein scandal and the names that are going to come out. Whether they be Republican, independent, left-wing, right-wing, up-wing, down-wing, whoever they are, they need to be exposed and they need to be held accountable. It is because of the survivors that we demand this. And this regime and MAGA Congress should not have been dragging their feet on that discharge petition, only to go around and nearly unanimously passing that bill and Donald Trump signing it. Now it's up to Pam Bondi, who may not release the files, saying that we have opened new investigations through for which these files are evidence. It's very likely that that's what's going to happen, and we're not going to see the Epstein files. And if for some reason they do release the Epstein files, they will be heavily redacted to the point where we are going to have to play, fill in the box and this puzzle of who is who. And the survivors will have to pinpoint and say, that's my experience, that's my testimony, that's me, that's me, that's me. And that would expose them to liability. So at the end of it all, it may have to come down for members of Congress to read out the names of the people who are in those redacted files, so as to be shielded by the speech or debate clause, and so as to shield the survivors from liability, legal liability, by way of reading their work product and the work product of Congress itself in having the names released and all the files released. Don't forget that we are walking into a world next year without an East Wing. Remember that Donald Trump destroyed the East Wing. Before that, Donald Trump destroyed the Rose Garden. We also know now that Donald Trump destroyed the Lincoln bathroom and turned it into a marble, whatever you want to call it, marble mausoleum. We know that he's doing all of this without congressional authorization. And destroying the East Wing is a crime of destruction of federal property that goes above $1,000 and therefore is a felony. I'm surprised that Congress still has not come out and authorized the demolishing of the East Wing retroactively, so as to shield Donald Trump from any liability once he leaves office, because the statute of limitations for that destruction of property charge is 5 years. We are seeing, as I say, we're going into a year where a lot of things are not what they were a year ago. Even a year ago, the world was coherent. Now, economists don't know if it's a recession, if it's a vibe session, if it's a stagflation, because the numbers aren't coming out. Now the police state is using surveillance and starting to use surveillance. Mind you, Donald Trump still hasn't fully deployed or even fully hired all of his DHS agents. They are just starting out the surveillance state. The big bad bill's actual cuts on Medicaid and SNAP have not even been implemented yet. And we are seeing flare-ups of what it will be like once they are implemented. And the most acute of them will be the healthcare decisions that millions of Americans will have to make if MAGA decides not to renew the Affordable Care Act subsidies. Because MAGA's healthcare plan is that they have a few good ideas and they're putting it into writing and they'll be ready in 2 weeks. That's their medical plan. And if we are to rely on that, then we are lost. Then you have the corruption. Donald Trump's corruption does not know bounds. Everything from meme coins to watches to cryptocurrency to AI. I don't even know how he became a billionaire because of his cryptocurrency, and he's doing that all while sitting in the White House. He's getting payments from people at the odds of millions of dollars to be able to seek pardons, and he's giving out pardons because he's getting paid for them. He's building a ballroom in place of the demolished East Wing with money from oligarchs who are handing him literal bars of gold. And he's using the pardon power in such a way as to abuse the pardon power, and we saw the extreme abuse of it when he finally, after so long, went and tried to pardon the fake electors of the different states like Nevada and Georgia, who were part of his seditious conspiracy plan to overthrow our republic. But the chink in that is that those are state crimes that they have been indicted for. And the President of the United States cannot pardon for state crimes. The governor of those states are the ones who can pardon. And this symbolic pardon to these people is nothing if not a intimidation tactic and a threat and a cajoling of these governors to then go ahead and dismiss those cases or pardon the people who are convicted at trial, should it go to trial. So we have a country that is in flux. We're going to see Donald Trump give his State of the Union in January. I think it's January? Yeah, it's in January. And he's going to talk about his accomplishments, which are going to be a big stack of lies. And we're going to see the country hobble one continuing resolution after another, after another, after another. And we're going to see politicians become louder because it is an election year. But at the same time, what needs to get loud is the voice of the people who tell our elected leaders that we want affordable cost of living, we want affordable energy costs, we want affordable housing, we want to be able to live in a clean environment, we need to be able to live in a safe environment without federal agents roaming around arresting whoever they want. We need tranquility and general welfare of our society. That's what we need. And that's not what we are getting right now from Donald Trump's regime. His attacks on the environment, to education, to our constitutional rights, to our privacy rights, to our well-being by way of increasing the cost of living by putting tariffs. These things are threats to American democracy and everyday American life. And that is what we are going to be seeing more of in the coming year. It's going to be a difficult time. Prices are likely not going to come down to the level that Americans would like. And that will be an issue. Affordability will be an issue for the 2026 midterm elections. We have to remind Americans that Donald Trump would rather put up AI videos of shitting on American people then provide the American people with an affordable cost of living, affordable health care, and the basic safety that Americans need with Social Security and Medicaid, and not having our streets overrun by federal agents. That's what we need in our country. We need politicians who are not corrupt, who don't make millions and billions of dollars based on insider trading, based on Donald Trump's position, based on their position in the cabinet, whether it be Lutnick or Witkoff or whoever else is enriching themselves and their families because they're in a position of power as part of the U.S. government. These are corruption icebergs, and we're just seeing the tips of those icebergs. And we need to make noise so we have accountability and we can get this corruption out of our system. Our government, how it will run once Donald Trump is done with it, is something that we can't predict. It's going to be radically different from what we have experienced before. Donald Trump has thrown our government off balance. The Supreme Court is unwilling to push back in a sufficiently stern manner. And Congress has been compromised by Mike Johnson. And no matter how much John Thune may want to work towards some sort of bipartisan, workability between the two parties, Mike Johnson will not budge from Donald Trump's side unless Mike Johnson sees Donald Trump sinking like an anvil. And Donald Trump will sink like an anvil when the American people realize that prices are not going to go down, when the DHS, Army, police state becomes so overburdening for the cities and towns and across the country that people come onto the streets and realize that we are not living in a normal time. So remember, you have a right to protest peacefully. That is constitutionally protected under the First Amendment. You must remain peaceful. Dress up as frogs, as unicorns, dance down the streets, sit down all around the streets on public property, get permits to protest where permits are required, follow the law, and yet be heard. Come out in numbers that nobody can deny and show the world and our government that we are not happy with how Donald Trump's regime is commandeering our government and the rule of law. Thank you for listening for nearly 40 minutes, if any of you have stuck around. And if not, there are shorts that you can look at in the short section of this video. And I will talk to you soon. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, everybody.